but we'll start over so it's all kind of in one class instead of broken up. The story of Esther is really neat story. A lot of plot twists and a lot of drama and things like that. And so anyways, we want to talk about Esther today, and we might get to the questions and answers on this lesson. We might not. I don't know yet. We'll see how it goes. But Esther, we talked not too long ago about all of the different other books in the Bible, such as Daniel and Ezekiel and Jeremiah and Lamentations, being around this same time period and how they intertwine, and you have different perspectives and everything. So Esther is around 483 to 471 BC, somewhere in that time period. And this is right in between some stories in Ezra. So it kind of falls, so when the time period that Ezra is written, chapters 1 through 6 is about 538 to 516 BC, and then Ezra 7 through 10 is around 458 BC. So you can see Esther is happening in about the same time period over here in another land. And it's kind of neat how all of that kind of intertwines a little bit. And we know this by what kings were present, or what kings were ruling during that time, and what was going on, and what we see in Esther, and who the king is, and who the king is in Ezra in the first 6 chapters and the last part of the book. So anyways, so who is king in Esther? What's the king's name? Ahasuerus. I'm going to try to say that a little bit during this class. I tried to avoid Ahasuerus. And that is the Hebrew name for this king. What was his Greek name that we read about? Xerxes. So Ahasuerus, he holds a huge banquet we see in the first chapter, a huge display of all of his royal riches and basically showing off all of his might. And I mentioned, if I had a parade of all of my riches, it would, don't blink because you would miss it. There's not much there. 180 days of displaying all of his military might, his royal, just everything, and 180 days of, and he had his princes, his military people, he had everybody there basically just showing off. And at the end of this 180 days, he holds, it looks like, another banquet for 7 days. And this was for everybody at the citadel in the palace at Susa. And basically, it's a 7-day drunken party is what he had. And it talks about the wine was flowing. They were drinking out of the gold scepter, out of the gold cups, and just drinking. On the 7th day, when he was drunk, he sent for his queen, Vashti, and to be basically put on display for all the people, the princes, and everybody else there to see. So he sent word with his eunuchs to go get her and bring her in. And what did she do? She refused. And as I mentioned on Wednesday night, it says he was wanting to bring her in with her crown, wearing her crown. And some scholars believe that the reason why she refused was because it appears that he wanted her to come in naked, just wearing her crown. So whether that was the case, or she just didn't want to be put on display for everybody to look at, whatever the case is, she refused. So what happened? What did the king do?
He banished her.
Banished her. deposes the queen, immediately removes her from office. He was advised by his officials, hey, you better do something about this, and he agreed because there could be an uprising of women, wives not submitting to their husbands and doing what they say, and this could be a big problem if the queen won't even listen to the king. Then how are we going to be able to control our own wives? So you better do something about it. So he banished her and kicked her out of office. So we also read. So this was the third year of Ahasuerus' reign. We read later that in the 7th year of his reign is when he was looking for a new wife. So something happened there within the 4 years, and what they believe might have happened is this huge feast that he was having was basically a pre-celebration, or let's call it a huge pep rally, before he went to go fight against the Greeks. And documents show that he lost against the Greeks at first and didn't overpower them, came back to the palace, and they think that might be what's happening in these 4 years of time between Queen Vashti getting kicked out of office and him finding a new wife, because that's a pretty big time period. You would think that, hey, she's going to get kicked out, I need to look for another queen pretty quick. But they think that's what possibly is happening during this time. We're not 100% sure about that, but that would account for 4 years. So anyways, the search for the new queen begins. The king's attendants suggested that a search be conducted throughout the entire empire for a beautiful, young, unmarried woman, a virgin, and to be brought into the royal harem in the fortress of Susa. These young women were gathered and placed under the custody of Haggai, not to be confused with the prophet Haggai, but Haggai, the king's eunuch, who was in charge of the women's quarters. The women underwent a 12-month period of beauty treatments, getting ready, with different cosmetics and oil and skin enhancers, all these things to try to make them beautiful for the king. But a 12-month period of beauty treatments. And then after completing their year-long prep, each woman would have her turn to go into the presence of King Ahasuerus for the king.
It makes you wonder how good looking they were if it took them a year to get ready.
About a year.
For the king to choose his favorite replacement for Vashti. It sounds like, I believe it sounds like maybe they had like the gathering everybody up, and then, hey, you made the first cut, you get dwindled down, you made the second cut, all right, now you can join in to the harem and go into the palace and start getting ready. And I believe it was the Jewish historian Josephus that wrote that there was about 400 women that made the final cut that were in this group that made it to the palace, and Esther was one of them. Did you have something?
I'm just wondering about their behavior. So.
The behavior?
Yeah. All those women.
Oh yeah. Yeah, probably a lot of backbiting and all that kind of stuff too, right? So Esther was chosen as a favorite of Haggai, right? He was in charge of all the women and found favor with him, so he was giving her preferential treatment as far as food and cosmetic advice and things like that. So she followed his advice, and when it was her time, she impressed the king. When it was her time to go into his presence. The king loved Esther more than the others and made her queen. and a grand feast was held to celebrate her coronation. Who is Mordecai? Her cousin, right? And basically, Mordecai, Esther's parents died when she was young, and Mordecai was a little bit older than her and took her in himself and basically raised her. So even though he was a cousin, he was a father figure, or that kind of thing. So they had that kind of relationship, but they were really tight, and we can see that because during this time, Mordecai, Esther's cousin, father, waits at the palace gates, and it looks like during some of this time, there's another year here made with that's noted that it's about 5 years, and it looks like Mordecai is waiting outside on a regular basis for about 5 years, just kind of, hey, what's going on in there? Hey, trying to get word to Esther, trying to see how she's doing. So he's there a lot during this time period. And while he's there, he hears of two officials that are plotting against King Xerxes. And their name is I think Bigthan and Teresh, two officials that were plotting to kill the king. So he sends word to Esther, and he's able to get word to Esther, hey, about this plot. So Esther tells the king about this plot to kill him. And after investigation, he finds out that it's true. So he has these two killed. And he's aware of Mordecai and his involvement with being able to let him know about it. And it says that it was written down. All right, during this time, Haman, 5 years after Esther was made queen, this guy named Haman has been promoted within the king's court. Yes, sir.
One thing that runs through my mind, him sitting at the gate, that was a custom of the Jewish leaders of the cities, just like when Ruth, or was it Boaz, went to the gate and met the city elders, basically. So maybe that's why Mordecai sits at the gate of the palace, because that might be where the elders of the Jews would have been accustomed to do that.
Yeah, it's a possibility.
So
Yeah.
that just runs through my mind. It's kind of a similarity, sitting at the gate.
Yep.
So that would explain why he would be there, because people coming and going.
Well, I think his main reason for being there, though, was because
Yeah.
his loved one was on the other side of the wall. I think that's the main reason, but that's very good possibility also. But so Haman, King Xerxes, I have a hard time saying that. Ahasuerus.
I'm so sorry.
Yeah.
It's like, obviously you're nothing like Porky Pig,
Yeah.
but all of us, Xerxes.
That's right. That's right.
Every one of us.
Yeah.
Xerxes.
Yeah, and I was even saying that wrong last night. I was saying Xerxes. Jennifer was like, it's not Xerxes, it's just Xerxes. I said, but there's an X there. So anyways, King Xerxes promotes Haman to have authority over all the princes and the king's servants. And they all bowed down and paid homage to Haman. And basically paying homage, paying respect, reverence, submission. It's more than just politeness. It's bowing, it's kneeling, it's offering gifts. And Haman just eats this up. We read on 2 occasions in the book of Esther where Haman is really, hey, look at me, and look, actually 3 occasions, because he does it later at the banquet, like, hey, look at me, and here's the position that I hold, and all of this stuff. He's very full of himself. But Mordecai refuses to bow down to Haman. And how does Haman deal with that? And does he like that? Does he not like that?
No, his anger grew more and more and more.
Say it again.
His anger grew more and more.
That's right. So his anger brew about, just eats him up, that just one guy, Mordecai, won't bow down to him. So much that, I can't stand him. I want to kill him. Not just him. I want to kill everybody that looks like him. I want to kill everybody that acts like him. I want to kill everybody that has the same faith as him. I want to kill all of his people. That's how much this guy despises it. And it doesn't say anything about anybody else not bowing down to him. It's just, hey, I'm bow down, bow down, bow down. One guy, I hate him. I hate that guy. So he goes home and talks about it, and because he hated Mordecai, hated Mordecai so much that he devised a plot to kill Mordecai and all the Jews. Mordecai informs Esther of the plot and urges her to speak to the king. Now, what's the problem with that?
She can't approach the king unless he requests her with the what do you call it?
Scepter? Yeah. Summons her and allows her to come in, right?
She could be actually put to death
Right.
for approaching the king.
Right.
Unless he asked her.
A lot different in today's age, right? Where you can go to your wife and ask her something. Or your wife come to you and ask you something. And you have that mutual, totally different scenario back then. King, queen, different country, different culture, different rules, different regulations, and things like that.
At home?
I'm just gonna say Stephen's scepter.
Yep.
Yeah.
So she was reluctant to do this because she feared for her life, right? She didn't want to, hey, I'm the queen, but I can't just go to the king and talk to him like, husband, wife, whatever. He could have my head chopped. If he's in a bad mood, or if he doesn't want to see me, or whatever, I don't want to go through that.
Plus, she's trying to keep a low profile because of being Jewish,
That's right.
which is odd because Mordecai just comes out and says he's a Jew.
Right.
So that's kind of odd.
So during this time that Esther is trying to figure out, hey, I can't just approach the king. We read in Esther chapter 4, starting in verse 14. Excuse me. Mordecai says, "For if you remain silent at this time, liberation and rescue will arise for the Jews from another place, and you and your father's house will perish. And who knows whether you have not attained royalty for such a time as this." What that means is, this is your opportunity, Esther. And who knows, you might have been put in this position to take care of this. And if you don't do it, somebody else will, and you could have found favor in God's sight. This is your moment to shine. This is your moment. This is it. So then we read in verse 15 through 17, then Esther told them to reply to Mordecai, "Go, assemble all the Jews who are found in Susa, and fast for me. Do not eat or drink for 3 days, night or day. I and my maidens will also fast in the same way. And thus I will go into the king, which is not according to the law. And if I perish, I perish. So Mordecai went away and did just as Esther had commanded him. So I mentioned Wednesday night that in the book of Esther, God's name is not mentioned one time. But we can see with Mordecai's not bowing down to Haman, we can see with Esther's discussion right here with telling Mordecai to go fast. We see in the whole scriptures, Old Testament and New Testament, a lot of times fasting and prayer to Yahweh go hand in hand with the Jewish people. So we can see that even though his name is not mentioned, we can see, number one, how he's working throughout this whole story, and also how we can see God through this anyways, no matter if God's name is mentioned or not in here. Yes, sir.
That's just what I was gonna say. God may not be mentioned, but we can see his providence.
Right.
Working through, Esther.
That's right. Yeah, we can see God's work through this whole thing. So she tells Mordecai, okay, I'm going to go ahead and do it, and if I die, I die. Go fast and pray for 3 days, and we'll do the same on our end. Gather up all the Jews and fast and pray about this. So Esther, after 3 days of fasting, she puts on her royal robes, approaches the king's throne room, and the king sees her and offers the scepter. Basically, I'm accepting you coming to me rather than cutting her head off and killing her. I'm accepting you coming to me. And then asks her, what's troubling you, Queen Esther? Because something's odd. What's troubling you? Because she wouldn't normally do this. She wouldn't normally come into his presence without being summoned, right? So he knows something's off. Maybe she was crying. Maybe he saw her facial expression. Maybe whatever it was, he knew that something was wrong. It's like, what's troubling you? And then he says, what is your request? And then he says, whatever it is that you want, up to half the kingdom, I will give to you. And he says this multiple times throughout this book. 4 or 5 different times. Up to half the kingdom I'll give to you. What do you want? What's your request? And what does she ask for the first time? What does she ask for?
Come to a banquet.
Come to a banquet.
You and Haman.
With Haman. Will you please come to the feast that I've prepared for you, just you and Haman? And so what does the king do?
Okay.
Summons Haman right away and says, Haman, come on, we're going to a banquet. So they come together, and what happens at this first banquet?
They talk and get cozy.
Say it again?
They just talk.
They just talk, right? And the king asks her again, okay, now we're at this banquet, what's your request? Up to half the kingdom I'll give you. So she didn't ask for riches, she didn't ask for half the kingdom, she just says, what does she request at this banquet?
Another night.
Another banquet. Can you come to a banquet tomorrow for this feast that I'm going to prepare? Just you and just Haman and just me, right? So they leave this first feast. Haman, unaware of Esther's plan or why she's wanting to have this feast, he went and told everybody, all the friends, all his family, his wife, hey, I get to go to the feast with just the king and queen, just me, and hey, here he is again, all about Haman. He's really excited, but still, what was still eating at him? Even though he was about to go to the feast with the king and queen, and he was so excited about that, and he's been elevated to this high promotion, what was still deep down eating at him? Mordecai, right? So Mordecai, not bowing down to him, was still burning him up. And when he went home and he was talking to his wife, Zeresh, and his friends, they suggested that he build gallows to hang Mordecai. Said, look, just, and don't even do, I mean, I'm talking 50 cubits high. Anybody know how tall that is?
75 foot.
About 75 foot. You think about how tall is this building, Randall?
30.
Outside, 30? All right, so double that plus some. Gallows that high, right? And hang him. So, all right, let's move back over to King Ahasuerus. That night, he couldn't sleep very well. He just had some insomnia. He just couldn't sleep. So what does he have done? What better to get some sleep is
To read the Chronicle.
bring me the not this Chronicles, but bring me the history of the events that have been going on in Persia, and just bring me that. Let's read from the diary or the logbook or whatever you want to call it. That's pretty boring. That'll put you to sleep, right? What did they find when they were reading this? What did they come across? Now think about this. This was probably about 5 years ago or so. What did they come across?
They found out that Mordecai actually saved his life.
That's right. That's right. I remember Mordecai telling us about the plot of these two guys that were going to kill me. What did we ever do for that guy? What did we ever do for Mordecai? And they said nothing. We didn't do anything. Well, that's not right. We need to do something for this guy. Well, this was in the middle of the night, right? So in the morning, he says, hey, who's out in the courtyard? And they said, Haman is out there, because Haman was just coming up to come and tell the king about these gallows that he had just made so he could hang Mordecai. And he was coming to tell the king about his plan to kill Mordecai. But the king was saying, hey, who's out in the courtyard? Well, it's Haman. So when Haman walks in, he come get him. He comes in, and before Haman is able to tell him about these gallows, king said, hey, I got something. If you were going to honor somebody, if you were wanting to honor somebody, what would you do? How would you do it? How would you do it, Greg?
How would I do it?
How would you honor somebody? How would the
With
king?
a banquet? With a big banquet?
Yep.
Invite him?
All right. I would put the royal robes that the king wore.
Yeah.
I'd put that on that guy.
Yeah.
Because Haman's thinking it's about himself. He said, who else would he be wanting to honor other than me? Well, king, I would put the robe that you wore on this guy. Okay. What else? Well, I would put the crown that you wore on this guy. Okay. And I would also take the horse that the king rode on. I would put that guy on that horse. And I would prance him around the city square and show him off to everybody, showing how much this guy was appreciated and honored. All the time, Haman's thinking about himself. He said, that's a really good idea, Haman. There's a guy, Mordecai, he's right outside the city gates. I want you to go out there and do that for him. What a plot twist.
I think the kicker was, didn't they have to bow down to him?
Had to bow down to him, and
Including Haman.
Haman is walking this horse with Mordecai on it, with the king's robe, with the king's crown, with the king's horse, through the city square. And it says that after he had did that, he covered his head and went home. How embarrassed and how ashamed and how humbled Haman was during this time. I mean, that's not what he was expecting. He was expecting the honor. He thought it was all about him, but it wasn't. It was about Mordecai. So, I think you think he was burned up then. He was really burned up about what he had to do to Mordecai here. So after Haman went home, covering his head, he didn't no more get home. It was time for the banquet for the king and the queen and him. So he goes to this banquet, and the king asks again, okay, Esther, we're here. What is your request? What is your petition? Up to half the kingdom I'll give you. And Esther says, if it pleases the king, spare me and my people. So here she's giving it up that she is a Jewish person, right? For we have been, there's a plot against us and we'll be destroyed and we'll be killed and annihilated. And she goes on to tell him, if we had only been sold into slavery, I would have remained silent. I mean, this isn't about just being sold, but we're talking about annihilation here. We're talking about killing all the Jews. This is huge. I can't not speak up, and that's why I'm here. And King Ahasuerus loved Esther so much, he bows up, who is he, and where is this who would do something like this? And what does Esther say?
Yeah, this would be the enemy.
Can you see the climatic? It's him! This evil man Haman, right? So Haman became terrified before the king and queen that it was him that had devised this plan to kill Mordecai and all of the Jewish people. So the king is angry and he leaves the room. Meanwhile, you have Haman that's begging for his life to Queen Esther. And somehow or other, it looks like, hey, Esther looks and he falls while Esther's on the couch and the king walks back in. Now you got Haman on top of Esther looking like he's assaulting her in some kind of a way.
I think he's thrown himself on.
Throwing her, yep.
He's having a bad day.
Yeah, bad day.
Oh, what?
Started real early, yep.
I don't know.
Bad day just got worse.
Yeah, bad day just got worse. So, before the king could even say anything like kill him or get him or anything like that, the other officials already had a cloth over his head, was already taking care of him. And then one of the king's eunuchs mentioned about the gallows that he had built for Mordecai. And said, he's got these gallows over there that he built for Mordecai to kill him. And what does the king say?
Put him on it.
Hang him. Hang him. Right? And so they hanged, chapter 7, verse 10. So they hanged Mordecai on the gallows which he had prepared for Mordecai. And then the king's anger subsided. What happened with Mordecai?
He was promoted.
He was promoted. Basically, it sounds like to Haman's position, right? Esther spoke again to King Ahasuerus. And she wanted to have the letters that were already sent out about killing the Jews to have that revoked, because remember, the word is still out from Haman. The word was still out that they were going to still kill the Jews, and if the king didn't hurry up and send out a letter and, hey, I want to get this word out there not to do this evil thing, it could have still happened, even a portion of it. So that was her request to the king. So write new letters to all the 127 provinces, and seal it with the signet ring so they knew that it came from him. He also wrote a letter saying that they had the right, the Jews had the right to worship and to assemble. And they also had the right to fight and battle anybody who was trying to attack them. So in other words, if they didn't get word that they weren't supposed to kill the Jews, and it happened anyways, you got the right to battle and fight. So we had this Jewish, thing going on with all the Persians that maybe didn't get word or wanted to kill the Jews anyways, that there was still some battling going on. But he sent word that anyone who might try to attack them, or their women or their children, they had a right to protect themselves, and they also had a right to fight and kill. So Mordecai goes out rejoicing. It says, in robes of blue and white, with a large crown of gold, with garments of fine linen and purple, in the city of Susa, and he shouted and rejoiced. After this, we see that the Jews did rise up against all that hated them, and that they were allowed to fight. It says that the Jews struck all their enemies, and let's turn to chapter 9, verses 5 and 6. Thus the Jews struck all their enemies with the sword, killing and destroying, and they did what they pleased to those who hated them. At the citadel in Susa, the Jews killed and destroyed 500 men. And there's some names here. I'm going to butcher them probably. And Parshandatha and Dalphon and Aspatha, Paratha, Adalia, Aridetha, Parmashta, Arisai, Aridai, and Vesitha. These are the 10 sons of Haman and the sons of Hammedatha, the Jews' enemy, but they did not lay their hands on their plunder. On that day, the number of those who were killed at the citadel in Susa was reported to the king. Now, when he got reported this, he goes, look, y'all killed all these people, 500 men plus the sons of Haman. I wonder what else is going on in all the other provinces. How many other people are killed? It ended up being like 7,500 people. Or 75,000, I'm sorry, 75,000 people. At this time, there was a celebration after this. There was a celebration with the Jewish people. They had regained their freedom, they weren't going to get destroyed, and they killed all these people that were against them. I've got this map up here. I'm kind of jumping just a little bit, but I want to see where Susa is. Okay? This is where Susa is. And you can see where Jerusalem is. That's a good distance away. I think it's about 900 miles, roughly. So during this whole time of exiles that happened before this, this is how far we're talking. 900 miles roughly around in this area to Jerusalem. So that's how far away from home they were. In this area, we talked before about some of the artifacts that are found in some of the scriptures that we see. Even though we don't have artifacts specifically about this story with Esther, we have found archaeological evidence of Susa, and this is basically the palace at Susa, and these things match up with how they're described here, where Esther walks in, and it talks about the courtyard, and where Esther walks into the king's throne room opposite of the entrance. I mean, the writer of Esther describes the palace in certain ways that matches up with what they found, what they've unearthed with the foundations and all of that. The audience or the court of the gardens where Xerxes' banquet took place probably is in this area. The king's gate where Mordecai sat was here in this area. The harem where Esther and the other young ladies stayed was probably here. The inner courtyard facing the throne room where Esther prepared to enter the king's presence. The throne room where Esther approached Ahasuerus unsummoned. And the outer courtyard where Naaman waited to speak to the king.
Don't you wonder why the king didn't see those gallows that are 75 feet high?
Don't know exactly where it was in comparison to this, and he might have, maybe didn't know what it was for. Maybe he didn't see it, if he's in his palace. It sounds like it happened pretty quick, it was that first banquet. Sounds like they were erected pretty quick before he went to a second day. You know what I mean? Because his wife said, hey, why don't you build gallows to hang him? And then the very next day is when they had the banquet. So it might have been poof, they were up, Jean Perrot, which is, I believe, a French archaeologist who led the excavations at the Palace of Susa from 1969 to 1979, concluded, there is no doubt that the author of the book of Esther possessed a knowledge of the arrangement of the royal palaces of the period and the customs of the Achaemenid court. Ultimately, the book of Esther purports to provide the historical background of the Feast of Purim, which we're about to get to, which derives its name from the fact that Haman cast the pur, or like casting lots, right? And they've actually found little, what we would call dice, right? Die with Persian writing and things like that on it. It's where they casted lots to figure out what day we're going to kill the Jews. Is basically what that was amounted to. The Haman cast lots to try to destroy the Jewish people. Even today, many Jewish people in Israel and around the world celebrate their deliverance through the Feast of Purim, which is found in the last part of chapter 9, is the feast that is made to commemorate this whole story of Esther. One thing I do want to talk about is when we're talking about the gallows, right? We're thinking gallows. That's the first thing that I've always come to my mind is something like this, what we use to hang people with a rope, right? Now think about this: 75 feet up in the air. I don't know how they would do that with our modern day of thinking about gallows. Gallows, the Hebrew word is often translated as hang, could also be interpreted as impaled. The Hebrew term talah means to suspend. While it can refer to hanging, it doesn't specify the method. In the context of Haman's execution, the gallows he built was likely a tall stake or a pole, and historical evidence suggests impalement was a common Persian method of execution, making the interpretation more likely. So in ancient Persia, impalement was known as a method of execution and public display of bodies, making a plausible interpretation. Haman built this 75-foot gallows for Mordecai, which is a very tall structure. This height is more consistent with the impalement on a stake rather than hanging from a rope. And some of the things that they had found have been graphics and things like that, such as this. So this would make more sense on hanging Haman or Mordecai. And think about Haman's sons. If you read in the scriptures, in this story, it says that they killed the sons. And then Esther's next request to the king was she wants them hanged also. They were already dead. It's not the process. She had them staked up for everybody to see. It's almost similar to that of the crucifixion. It's for everybody to see. And not just everybody to see. It's 75 feet up in the air. Like Randall said, this building's 30 feet tall on the outside. That's huge. And Haman being impaled and hanging up there like that. So anyways, real quick, we're about out of time, but Esther 9, verse 20 and following, it talks about the feast of Purim, and it's basically a huge celebration about the story of Esther and the saving of the Jewish people during this story that the Jewish people still celebrate today. And Purim comes from the P-U-R word, and that's the casting of lots. So they're basically taking the casting of lots term and changing it into a feast. And what they do is they retell the whole story of Esther, the Jewish people, even today. And what they'll do is they'll have Purim baskets and food, and they'll give food to the needy. And they'll also, when they're retelling the story, every time where they get to the name Haman, they have noisemakers, or they'll make loud noises to cover up his name as they're telling the story, because he is such the villain in this whole story. And they'll do that. But they normally do that. It's an annual festival that is normally around late February, early March. But is widely celebrated by Jewish communities around the world. It's an annual festival that commemorates the saving of the Jewish people in ancient Persia from the plot to destroy them. And Purim is celebrated on the 14th day of the Hebrew month of Adar, which is typically falls in late winter, early spring. And I think it's more like February or March. So I think this year, I think they celebrated March 14th and 15th, I believe. So anyways. So that's the story of Esther, how Esther saved the people, and we can see God through this whole story. If you look at your lesson book on page 117, God provides for His people by weaving a series of let's call them coincidences, quote unquote, that just happen to play out perfect, right? Esther just happened to become queen. Mordecai just happened to advise her to keep her Jewish ethnicity a secret. Mordecai just happened to overhear an assassination plot against Ahasuerus. Haman just happened to plot to kill all the Jews, and Haman just happened to plot and plan to kill Mordecai on his gallows. Ahasuerus just happened to not be able to sleep that night, and before Mordecai was supposed to die. And Ahasuerus just happened to read about